Well, there's a couple of things I need to clear up. First one is that we do love Brian and Serena, and they are absolute incredible people, and you should give a great hand for your pastors right now because they are amazing. As much as they've gleaned from us, we've gleaned probably more from them. And listen, let me just say something about Genesis Church today. I've been taking notes for 3 days now, and there are just some things. You guys have an incredible church right here. And there's things I'm taking home, man. We're going to implement in our church this week. And just because you guys are so excellent at what you do. So thank you for that. Thank you for hosting us so well. Thank you to Brian and Serena for just being great friends. First thing, he did give me advice to give to Coach Gentry. I gave it to him. We lost. That's all I have to say about that. Kobe Bryant hit the game-winning shot literally 1.5 feet in front of me. And when he hit the shot, there's a couple of things you need to know about Cajun people. One is that they're nuts anyway, so they'll say anything. But if you add alcohol to that, it just gets out of control. And so there were people saying things about Kobe Bryant behind me that literally had made me blush. And so when he hit the game-winning shot, he turned around, he looked me dead in the eyes, and he did this. And so I got a finger shake from Kobe Bryant because he believes I was talking smack to him. And so I'm okay with that, all right? And the other thing you need to know is that I didn't pay for that ticket. Somebody else came and brought it to me and gave it to me. And finally, when I realized how good it was, I pulled it out, and the face value of that ticket was like $965. And so at one point, Coach Gentry was standing in front of me, and I said, Coach, listen, somebody paid a lot of money for me to sit right here. I'm going to need you to move over, all right? And so he never turned around, never said anything, but he just shook his head like this. And so that was it. This is my wife, Bonnie, right here sitting by Serena. Wave, babe, so you can meet her and see her. She is by far my better half. And then another thing, I do agree with Brian that we can come together and we can hate Texas. I want you to know that I love LSU. I also want you to know that we're terrible, and we're going to be terrible for the next few years. We don't use the word hate in my household because my 4-year-old granddaughter believes that hate's an ugly word. So we say we are strongly committed to our dislike of. So let me just put it in context for you. I know you're strongly committed to your dislike of Kevin Durant. I get that. Okay, and so I also know that you're strongly committed to your dislike of a few things. I don't strongly dislike Oklahoma. You probably don't strongly dislike LSU unless you're around in 2003. And then I'm sorry, but I'm really not because we beat y'all and won the national championship. When you're terrible, all you have is the past. I'm just throwing that up for you. I do think we could agree on this, though. Is it okay if we just agree to be united in our strong dislike of Arkansas? Can we do that? Because I just can't stand Arkansas. I'm telling you all that right now. I felt like that would be a freeing moment for somebody in this building and maybe a moment of bondage for Brian and Serena. And the other good news is it looks like that the New Orleans Saints are very, very much in pursuit of some guy you might have heard of named Baker Mayfield. And so we're pretty excited about the idea that he could become the quarterback in waiting at the New Orleans Saints, which happens to be the greatest football team on planet Earth outside of the college ranks. Okay, so now that we got all that stuff out of the way, again, it is an honor to be here. It's an honor to hang out with your pastor and his wife, and we just love them. We came in the door loving you guys, and you would say, well, man, you don't even know us. How could you love us? It's easy because they love you, and we love them, and so that means we love what they love. And they love you guys. You need to know that, all right? We're going to start today in Matthew chapter 25, and then we're going to look at Luke chapter 15 and also Acts chapter 8. Now, I need to have a moment of transparency here. For some of you, this could be a moment that actually sets you free. I'm going to need you to be extremely honest with me right now. How many of you are penny picker-uppers? When you see a penny, you pick it up. Come on, somebody, just own it. Wow, I just didn't believe we were going to need that much help in here today, but it looks like we are. My wife right here, she is a penny picker-upper, but it's out of character for her because she's generally a germaphobe. And so normally she won't pick up anything. Like when we go indoors in places, she'll wait for me to get there, not because she wants me to be courteous and open the door, but because she doesn't want to touch the door handle, okay? And so that's like she flushes toilets with her foot. You just need to know that's the way she operates. And so it's out of character for her to pick up pennies, but she picks up pennies every time she sees one. I never pick up pennies. She always pick up pennies. As a matter of fact, almost like it was scripted. Last night, we hung out with some of your lead team over here and had supper together. And when we were getting ready to leave, she comes walking across the room to me with this big smile on her face, holding this. Because she had just found a penny on the floor in the room next door. I have no idea if Brian or Serena planted it. I wouldn't put it past them, all right? But she has never seen a penny that she doesn't pick up. Now, so the question for her is, why don't I pick up pennies? And I actually can answer that for you. Did you know that it cost our government 1.5 cents to produce a penny? Now, I don't know if that makes any sense to you or not, but when something's worth 1 penny and it costs you 1.5 pennies to make it, the only people that would continue to do that is the government. You understand where I'm at, okay? So that doesn't make any sense. A penny doesn't have any value. There's a 50% loss every time we make one. So there's been a movement for several years now among people that have said we just need to get rid of the penny and only use nickels and dimes or whatever. And so I've told all this to Bonnie. I've told her, listen, they're not even worth what it costs to produce them. All right? And people want to get rid of them anyway. Why do you keep picking up pennies? And so she looks at me every time and she says this, because pennies add up. Well, can I tell you something? Much like you're a pastor, I'm an accountant. So I did the math. They don't. Pennies don't add up. We've known each other for 28 years. We've been married as of last Tuesday for 26 of those years. And so I went back and I kind of said, let's just run a little math here. Let's figure this thing out. And so I looked at it and I said, she probably picks up on average 1 penny a week. Sometimes, we have a really good week and we get 3 pennies. Okay. But then in other weeks, we go kind of on a penny fast. There's a penny drought right there in South Louisiana. We don't have any, all right? And, the hurricane took it away or something. So there's no pennies or 3 pennies. So I just said, let's just average. Let's just figure she picked up 1 penny a week. And so I went back and I said, all right, so that means that over the course of our 28 years of knowing each other, she has picked up $15 worth of pennies. Okay? Now, I said, okay, so that's not too bad. $15, that'll buy something. But anyway, so that's not bad. What if she did that for 50 years and we invested that? And so we took a penny a week for 50 years and we invested that. And I want you to know, if we got a good return on our money, about 6%, then what we would find is at the end of 50 years, we would have, now get ready for this because this number is probably going to be a mind-blowing number for you, $250. So when we retired with our retirement cash of $250, we could go out for a really nice retirement supper and then go back to work the next morning. Why? Because pennies don't add up. She's had back problems for a while, and I can almost guarantee you that half of her back problems is because she stops and she picks up pennies. I've spent way more than $250 trying to fix the back problems. But I'm not bitter. Y'all get it? Pennies have no value. And then here's the most aggravating thing. We have enough Germ-X in our vehicle that you could probably take a bath. Okay? And the reason for that is because she is a germaphobe. So when she picks up a penny, she only holds it for a second and she gives it to me. Because she won't hold it. Now, I'll take the penny and I'll lick my hand because I just don't care. She goes and takes a bath in Germ-X every time she picks up a penny, but she still picks them up. And I'm just going to tell you, it aggravates me. So I started trying to figure it out. Why do you pick up pennies? And this is what I came to the conclusion of a couple of weeks ago. Because my wife has the unique ability to see value in things that normally no one else sees value in. She sees value in things that nobody else sees value in. And even a penny, even though it costs more to make than it's worth, it has a value. There's a whole lot of things that I see in Bonnie that inspire me. Picking up pennies is not one of them, but there's a lot of things that do. She prays a ton. When she comes to me and says, Dan, I really feel like God said this, she pretty much has my full attention, because if God spoke to her, it's pretty much, or it is, a very powerful and impacting word. She has an ability when you're around her. She just makes you feel better about yourself. She just makes you feel good about yourself. And a couple of weeks ago, I even decided that her philosophy on pennies is inspirational to me. And it's actually what caused me to write this message. Because my wife has an uncanny ability to see the value in just one single thing. I want to read you a story from Matthew chapter 25 that Jesus told toward the end of his ministry. In verse 34 it says, "Then the king will say to those on his right, 'Come you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared from the creation of the world. For I was hungry and you fed me, thirsty you gave me a drink. I was a stranger, you invited me into your home. I was naked, you gave me clothing. I was sick and you cared for me. I was in prison, you visited me.'" I love this line. Then the righteous ones will reply, "Lord, when?" See, it's possible to become so connected to the plan of God for your life that when you do it, you don't even realize you're doing it. That's where they were. They just said, "Lord, when? When did we see you hungry or thirsty?" You know the rest of it. When did we see all this stuff happen to you and do it for you? Because, Lord, surely if you had been in jail, we would have come. Lord, we can't remember that ever happening. And then in verse 40, I want you to see this. Jesus responds with this statement. The king will say, "I tell you the truth, when you did it to," what's the next word? One. "When you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you were doing it to me." Our church, much like your church, we use series to communicate points because we've learned that there are topics in the Bible that just deserve more than 1 week's worth of attention. And we can communicate and really drive home some truth over the course of a couple of weeks better than we could in any given day. And so this passage that I just read to you was a foundational piece of a series that we just did when we were talking about how to live generously, and that we felt like this passage really represented how to do that. And the very last verse on the very last week of that series impacted me so deeply because of that phrase. Jesus said, "When you did it to one." See, it would get our attention normally if he had said, "When you did it to 100, or when you did it to 1,000, or when you did it for a whole country or a whole city." But Jesus wasn't so worried about that. He was just worried about the impact on one. And so what I realized in the midst of that is that one of the most godly characteristics of my wife that I needed to mold inside of me is that just like Jesus, she sees the value of one. And I think that probably means we should see the value in one as well. Jesus tells another story in Luke chapter 15. He actually tells 3 stories. All 3 stories are connected to the same principle, all right? So I just want to read you the first one, and then we'll talk about it. It starts in verse 1. It says, "Tax collectors and other notorious sinners often came to Jesus to listen to Jesus teach. It made the Pharisees and teachers of religious law complain that he was associating with such sinful people and even eating with them. So Jesus told them this story. If a man has 100 sheep, one of them gets lost, what will he do? Won't he leave the 99 others in the wilderness and go search for the one that is lost until he finds it? When he has found it, he will joyfully carry it home on his shoulders. When he arrives, he will call together his friends and neighbors, saying, 'Rejoice with me, because I have found my lost sheep.' In the same way, there's more joy in heaven over one lost sinner who repents and returns to God than over 99 others who are righteous and haven't strayed away." These 3 stories in Luke chapter 15, Jesus tells about one lost item in each story. In the first story, there's one lost sheep. The second story, there's one lost coin. In the third story, there's one lost son. The first 2 stories start and end the same way. There's a moment of desperation when the owner realizes something of value was lost. And then there's a moment of celebration in the end after they find that lost thing and restore it back to its place. The story of the sheep is the one that really, really gets my attention, because as a pastor of a church who sees things, and we see people, and we see usually more than that number come in, we start thinking in terms like this. If we had 100 and only one person didn't make it, that's a pretty good odd. That's pretty good odds for us, and we should probably feel pretty good about that. And usually when it comes to biblical things, and when it comes to looking at ourselves and are we doing a good job, we do feel good about that. We feel good about it until we read Luke 15, where God says, listen, the person that really, really, really is concerned about what I'm concerned about, they're not thinking about the 99 that are doing what's right. They're thinking about that one that's lost. They're thinking about that one lost sheep, or that one lost coin, or that one lost son, and it's impacting who they are and what they do. These stories illustrate for us the value that God puts on things that are lost. Jesus even went this far when he was talking to the teachers of religious law one time. He said, listen, I'm not here to talk to people who already think they've got it figured out. I'm here for people who have no idea what to do next, and I want to help them. In other words, he said it like this: I came to seek and save the lost. It's not the well that need a doctor, it's the sick. I'm here for people who need my help. I am looking for one person. It's a powerful truth that shapes the mission of the church still today. But sometimes in the middle of the big picture of that story, we miss one key significant point that I want us to focus on today, and it's this: that the shepherd and the woman and the father were all searching for just one. The town we pastor in, it's actually 3 towns that are right there together in South Louisiana. We're 6 miles from the Gulf Coast. We call it the Tri-City area. I don't know why they call it cities, because they're basically little towns. All 3 of them put together, and the surrounding communities, we have 21,000 people. You have more than that in a neighborhood here, okay? But I know this, that even in a town of 21,000 people, when I start looking at the enormity of the needs, when I start looking at everything that needs to be done and how far we are away from accomplishing what God wants to do, to be honest with you, I start getting intimidated. When I start thinking about how big that mission is, when I start thinking about how many people need help, how many people need to be connected with Jesus, I start getting intimidated and overwhelmed. And here's the danger in that. When I get intimidated and when I get well, let me back up and just tell you this story. My wife loves to renovate rooms in our home. That's actually not true. She loves to figure out they need to be renovated, what she wants done, and then she likes to tell me what to do. Come on, man. Are y'all with me? Y'all understand that? Some of y'all are just not bold enough to raise your hand, and actually you're just smarter than me, okay? So that's it. So what happens is a lot of times she'll give me a project, and when she gives me the project, she says, do you know how to do this? And of course my answer is yes. Listen, wives, when you give your husband a project and he says yes immediately, he's lying, okay? And we're just proud of the fact that we're lying, because here's what happens. We say, I'm going to go to my shop and draw that up. We're not drawing anything up. We're on YouTube. But you can learn how to cut crown molding on YouTube. I'm just letting you know. Sometimes when the job she gives me is big, I get overwhelmed and I just don't do anything. And I've learned that in the church we operate the same way sometimes. The job is so big, the task is so enormous that what we'll do is this. We'll get intimidated, and because we don't know where to start, we are frozen with inactivity and we do nothing. I believe that God wants us to get involved in His mission. But when the mission is so big, how in the world do we start? How can we possibly make a difference when we have no idea where to engage? And as I was studying this, and as I was thinking about that penny, and as I was looking at my wife's life, it just occurred to me this: that maybe a good strategy for us is to just start with one. To just start with one. When I look at our town, I know there are tons of people in our town that need to eat. When I think about everything that needs to be done, I get calls from missionaries every week. We get at least 10 calls a week from people that are saying, I can't pay my electric bill, or I can't pay my water bill, or I don't have any food. I mean, those things can really begin to overwhelm us because we keep hearing more and more and more. And I can focus so much on the big picture of how enormous the need is that I forget that if I could break that thing down into a small piece, I could actually do something that would make a difference for one. You know the old saying, how do you eat an elephant? And the answer is supposed to be, in most areas, one bite at a time, right? In South Louisiana, let me tell you how we answer that. How do you eat an elephant? You get a big pot and you make a gumbo. I want to encourage you, if you ever come to visit us, you're always welcome to do that. If we serve you gumbo, to take the approach called don't ask, don't tell. If you don't ask them what's in it, they won't tell you what's in it, okay? They'll try to convince you there's chicken and sausage gumbo. Listen, there are no chickens in South Louisiana. And if they ever tried to feed you anything that's called sauce piquant, run. Because you know what sauce piquant is? Whatever I hit on the way home, I took it and put it in a soup. So they can put alligator. Y'all ever heard of a Nutri-Rat? You know what a Nutri-Rat is? It's a rat that's about this long. They say it tastes like chicken. I'm pretty sure I've had it in gumbo. That has nothing to do with the message except to tell you if you go to South Louisiana, make sure. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. See, I can't feed every hungry person in my town. I sure can't feed every hungry person in the world, but I could feed one. We had a group that came through in our church called One Child Matters, and we engaged with them individually, and we asked families to support one person. And Bonnie and I were privileged. We chose to support the country of the Dominican Republic, and we were privileged to go over there in November and meet the young boy that we sponsored and meet his family. And we got to look in the eyes of a 6-year-old boy who has the same name as my grandson, Samuel, and we got to look at him and see the difference that our $45 a month were making. And I walked away from that and I said, you know what? We can't feed the whole country of the Dominican Republic. As a matter of fact, if every pastor I knew of every church that I knew, if we all came together and decided to sponsor kids in the Dominican Republic, we couldn't even take care of all the kids in the Dominican Republic. But you know what I can do? I can take care of one. And when I got there, I realized, you know what? I can sacrifice a little more and I can take care of two. I can't pay every bill for every person that comes to see us during the week, but I can pay one and make a difference in their life. I can't engage with every need that I see, but I can promise you this, I can make a difference in the life of one. And what would happen? Let's just follow this thought for a minute. What would happen for all of us if in the church, what would happen if the people that attended this church this morning decided, you know what? I can't make a difference in every bit of Moore, Oklahoma, and I certainly can't make a difference in all of Oklahoma City, but here's what I could do. I could find one person and I could make a difference for one. What if every one of us did that? And then what if every one of us on top of that said, we're going to teach that person after we make a difference for them, we're going to teach them to make a difference for somebody else. And what if that making a difference in that physical need for that one person gave us the opportunity to invite them to come to church on Easter Sunday morning? Did you know that 85% of the people surveyed in the United States of America that do not attend church regularly said this, if somebody I knew would invite me, I would go? That means every person that you're thinking about right now that you know that doesn't have a relationship with Jesus, 8 out of 10 of them, if you ask them to come to church with you on Easter, they would come. What happens if on Easter Sunday they come because you were the one that could connect with them, and on that day they realize that they're not good enough without Jesus, and they make the decision to make Jesus the Lord of their life? You know what you'll find out? You'll send me an email or you'll send me a message on Facebook or something, and you'll say this, do you know that Easter Sunday this year is my favorite Sunday of all times because I brought somebody I knew and they connected to Jesus, and it's the best thing that ever happened to me. And what if after that we help that person reach one as well? Do you have any idea what the numbers would begin to look like? You're like, oh, well, here you are. You're just another one of them guys who want to have a big church. I could care less about having a big church. I tell our team there's a church down the street from us that would seat 900 people if they could fill it up. I pray every time I drive by that church and every Saturday again, I pray that God would fill it up 2 times on Sunday mornings, maybe 3 times on Sunday mornings, and that they would have over 3,500 people in that building, kids and all. Do you know how big of a difference it'd make in our community if one church could reach 3,500 people in a city of 21,000? I pray that God will help them do that. But you know how that happens? When real people like me and you say, hey, I can't reach 3,500 by myself, but I could reach one. There are some people in your life that no matter how hard I work or how hard I try or how hard Pastor Brian and Serena work or try, they'll never be able to talk to those people. Well, what if you decided I could reach one? I have a little accounting business. When you're a youth pastor for all the years that I was a youth pastor, that's how you pay for college and braces and vacations. Sometimes it's how you pay for milk and bread. All right? So that little business, I have a client in this business. I've had him for about 6 years now, 7 years now. I want you to look right here. If y'all are taping this, if you could erase this part from the tape, it'd be awesome. I think there's no chance he would see it, but I don't want him to hear this. I don't like him. He frustrates me. Every Easter I invite him to church. Every Easter he looks at me and lets me know how weak he thinks I am because I believe in God. A couple of years ago we were having a conversation. He looked at me He said, I just want you to know I believe there's something out there. I just don't know what it is. You know, it could be Buddha. It could be Krishna. It could be whatever. Maybe it's this Jesus thing. You know, I don't know, but I believe that. And so I just, you know, at some point you just got to say enough's enough. And so I just said, well, I've had enough. I'm just going to see if I can get this dude to fire me. And so I said, well, I'll tell you what, if you ever get real serious about that, I could help you. And he's like, so how much money do I have in the bank? And I'm like, it won't work. So he's keeping me around, and I've tried to drop him about 5 times. I've come home all these times, and I've told my wife, this is it. I'm done with him. I don't want to do his books. I don't want to go see him. I don't want to smell like smoke for days after I walk out of his office. And as soon as I say it, the Holy Spirit nudges me and says, but he's your one. And if you don't keep going, who's going to talk to him about Jesus? So you know what I do? I smell like smoke. I just get in the mud. Because people are worth it to God. What if all of us could reach one before the end of the year? So, well, Dan, that's just not even really a biblical approach. Actually, it is. Acts chapter 8, verse 26. It's a guy named Philip. He's leading this great revival in the country of Samaria. Here's what happens. As for Philip, an angel of the Lord said to him, go south down the desert road that runs from Jerusalem to Gaza. He started out, he met the treasurer of Ethiopia, a eunuch of great authority under the Candake, the queen of Ethiopia. The eunuch had gone to Jerusalem to worship. He's now returning. Seated in his carriage, he was reading aloud from the book of the prophet Isaiah. Numbers intrigue me. You already know that. I've told you that a couple of times. And so I started thinking about it. It just says he traveled from Ethiopia to Jerusalem. So I want to figure out how far that was. 1,500 miles. So Bonnie and I drove here. It's 650 miles from South Louisiana to here. So it's 2.5 times further than we drove. And he's in a horse-drawn chariot, a carriage. So I just thought about that. I thought, well, what if he could make 25 miles a day, which would be a lot to drive horses for 25 miles. But let's just assume he could. 2 months. He traveled 2 months minimum to get from Ethiopia to Jerusalem. And here's what happened when he got there. He got there and his skin was the wrong tone. He was a Gentile, which means he's just like any of the rest of us. He wasn't Jewish. And so when he got ready to go worship God, he was told, you can't go in and see God. You can stay out here with the rest of the people like you. So he traveled 1,500 miles over at least 2 months to go and try and meet with God. And he was told he couldn't meet with God. Now he's on his way home back to Ethiopia. He's got at least a 2-month journey. He's heading out. And can you imagine the disappointment he must have felt having come all that way to try to see God, only to be told he can't see God? Now, here's the cool thing about our God. When God sees somebody that's approaching him that way with that kind of passion, he's not going to sit back and let that need go unmet. So what he does is he goes and sees Philip. Philip is leading this massive revival. The entire country of Samaria is being turned on its ear. And God tells him in the middle of one of those moments, he says, hey, I need you to leave this big move that I'm using you for, and I need you to go down the desert road. And when he goes to the desert road, there's literally nobody there. He waits, and suddenly this chariot goes by. God says, I want you to go walk beside that chariot. He goes and walks beside the chariot. He hears the man reading from the Isaiah chapter 53. He asks him, he says, do you know what you're reading? He says, I have no idea what I'm reading. Would you get in here and tell me about it? Philip gets in the chariot with the man. Now, mind you, he just left a revival meeting where thousands of people are giving their heart to Jesus because God cares so much about one person that he sent his best guy down to a lonely road to find him. Philip leads him to Christ in the chariot. A little later on, the man sees a body of water. He says, can I get baptized? Philip baptizes him, and then the Spirit snatches him away. I love that part of the story. Something I saw just this week. If all God was concerned about was the eunuch getting saved, he would have snatched Philip out of the chariot the moment the guy prayed the prayer. But God was concerned about him taking the next step. So when we talk to you about taking steps, that's not just some random thing that we talk to you about because we think it's a cool idea. It's actually a biblical process to make you more like Jesus. So after Philip helped him take that next step, then God took him out of that place. Why? Because God, even in the midst of this move where thousands of people are getting saved, God is still watching for just one. What would happen if you and I would focus on making a difference in the life of just one? I'm pretty convinced of this. Most of us, when we give our hearts to Jesus, we just say this: God, I want to do something big for you. And this is the question I want to leave you with as we pray. What if the big thing we're supposed to do for God is impact just one? Could we and would we do it? Let's bow together for prayer, if you don't mind. We may do things a little differently in the church that I come from, but so I'm just going to take the approach that we take today, and our approach is like this. We just believe that everybody ought to have an opportunity to give their heart to Jesus in a moment like this. We also believe that when people choose to do that they should never have to do that alone. So the approach that we've taken is this. I love to pray with people about the moment where they can make Jesus the Lord of their life. So if you're here, I would never single you out. I would never embarrass you. As a matter of fact, Pastor Brian's going to come give you some direction in just a little bit. I just love the privilege of praying with you. If you said, you know what, Pastor Dan, here's the reality. I can't go after just one because I've never connected to Jesus. Let me say this to you right now. Maybe my wife and I drove 650 miles for you. Maybe you're the just one today that God wanted to speak to and say, hey, you're valuable in my kingdom. If you're here and you're not where you need to be with God, would you allow me the privilege of praying with you about that? Nobody's looking but me. I'd just love for you to say, hey, if that's you, just raise your hand up and down real quick. I'd love to pray with you about it. All right, I want you to look at me real quick. It has been my privilege to stand here and share the Word of God for you. I don't take it lightly that your pastor trusted me to stay here. But I want you to think about this. There's some little cards all over this room in the chairs that are invitation cards to bring people to church on Easter. Would you find the one person? I'm not asking you to find the person in the church down the street that's mad at their pastor. Because let me tell you something, if they're mad at their pastor there, they're eventually going to be mad at their pastor here. I'm trying to find the people who have never connected with Jesus. Would you find that person this week, next week, over the next 3 weeks? Maybe you can find more than one, but let's just start with one. Would you find one and see if God will use you to make a difference in their life? Invite them to come to church with you, and when they give their heart to Jesus, I promise you, you'll say it's your favorite day ever. It has been my joy and my honor to be with you guys today. Thank you so much. God bless you. I hope you have a great week. Pastor Brian, would you come give us some instructions, please, sir?
Our ushers.